Hey, Stephen, welcome to this month's edition of What's New in Digital. And this is going to be a special months. And I say that because we've not dove that much into copywriting in any of our episodes so far. It's been on a lot of just digital strategy as a whole, maybe advertising, but we've never actually brought in a copywriter. So, Stephen, I'm really interested in your 3 points this month that we're going to dive into today. So let's jump right into it and share with us, Stephen, what is point number one of copywriting of what's new?
Awesome. That's great. Thank you for having me today. Obviously, I think copywriting is super important. It's kind of like where the rubber meets the road, in my opinion, as far as like conversions are concerned. But I think we might want to start sort of by like defining what copywriting is, because I think it's sort of a harder question to answer than a lot of people assume. Like historically, copywriting has been sort of defined as like writing that aims to promote or to sell a product or service, or to persuade readers to like take a certain action, funnel them towards something we want them to do. So you can think print advertisements is like, a pretty traditional example of copywriting. But over time, it seems like people sort of equate copywriting with convincing people to buy things, which I don't necessarily love. And I prefer maybe a more like charitable definition by Shirley Polikoff that she says that copywriting is a direct conversation with your leads. And I just think it's important. Like that's sort of like the way I view copy. And I think that's probably the way like our entire team sort of here at No Typical Moments views copy. And I think it's really important to kind of frame your opinion and your perspective on copy before you try to actually engage it, because it totally informs like the way you're perceiving your customers and the way you're talking to them. And I think it's really important to like connect with your customers. And I think you'll end up with better copy when you're doing that like effectively and responsibly. And so that sort of like leads to my first point of our three, like what's new in copywriting, is that I'm kind of seeing like the line blurring a little bit between like copywriting and content writing. So if copywriting is historically like attempting to sell something, content tends to be considered like informing or engaging or nurturing your audience. And that's sort of like seen as two like distinct things. But I'm seeing a lot more and more that like there's a lot of copy out there that like informs and engages and like even delights people like before, trying to like get them to, sign up for the offer or do the thing or check this thing out. And I'm also seeing a lot of nurture content like blog posts and stuff like that. So like if you think of copy as like a sales page and nurture content is like a blog post, I'm seeing a lot of nurture content that does a really great job selling things, even if indirectly.
Let me
So I
ask you
think,
a question within that. So I've given this example a few times of this guy on Instagram who I love. His name is Knees Over Toes Guy, Ben Patrick. He does a fantastic job with content marketing strategy and just the amount of, well, I'm talking about his Instagram channel and the reels, the photos, the lives he does every single day. So what is the blend then of the copy and design video that you can use in combination with it to really nurture and build that connection? I go to his page every day as if it's like CNN, like what's new in the athletic movement.
Yeah. And I think the common thread there is like the value that your copy provides. Like you're going to that thread because it does something for you and it gives you something that you ideally can't really find anywhere else. And that alone is huge because like it builds trust like automatically when you're providing something that like actually does something meaningful. Like you've done half the work already. Like you're not even like they already trust you. You don't need to like convincing people to trust you doesn't like work as well as we like to think it does. So if you can do that organically in that way by providing content like that is actually helpful and valuable and solves a problem, I think you've done a lot of the work right there.
Perfect. Anything else we want to touch on point number one?
I think storytelling is worth pointing out, and that's something that we hear a lot about, and it's just like storytelling, like whatever. It sounds a little trite.
Let's go a little more specific. Who's an individual brand whose storytelling you really admire?
Individual brand. I mean, I think a lot about like Super Bowl commercials. I couldn't even like, I don't even know how effective they are because I can't think like Budweiser will do like a whole, like you won't even know it's a Budweiser commercial until the
Right.
end because they told you like a great story about like the Budweiser horses or something. And like I don't necessarily understand how that like directly like connects to the revenue that they make, but it clearly does because they're doing it. And you remember that, like, and you appreciate like the story that they gave you. So I think like a story in and of itself can be really helpful, although it looks very different like when you get a little more granular, like a Facebook ad, like a narrative or a story on a smaller scale might be more like I'm showing you, the reader, that I understand where you're coming from and that I am empathizing with your situation. I understand like what's happening and I might even have a way to solve it for you. So I think that's kind of how we can apply storytelling in a more kind of like granular way.
That empathy was the word that was going on in my head right when you said it, that a lot of the storytelling is around empathy.
Yeah. And that's something that I think is still missing from like, you know, the majority of marketing content is like, we just, you know, we want to make money and we don't care how. So we don't really need to like put ourselves in our customers' shoes. But when we do that, like, I think that like it has a lot of potential to just take us to the next level as marketers.
Perfect. Let's go to point number 2.
Point number 2, I don't exactly know how to phrase this. I call it like, yeah, a shift from black hat copywriting to white hat copywriting. I think I'm seeing this really sort of nice trend where marketers are trying to like be less manipulative and kind of like I said earlier, like see leads as people rather than dollar signs. And I think that's kind of translating into like a more authentic and like holistic approach to copywriting,
Mhm.
where like, because you know, people are so inundated with like all this marketing nonsense like all the time. And I think that setting yourself apart as sort of like, you know, a voice of authenticity and like trueness can be really big. And I think pain points are an important conversation to have because we have to understand our customers' pain points, right? Like we have to acknowledge them. But I see language sometimes that's like we have to agitate pain points. And like that doesn't feel great to me to like be
Right.
agitating customers, right? Like I want to like help them. And I'm seeing a lot of people, other, you know, copywriters and marketers, and a lot of their content seems to be like moving in a similar direction where like we're focusing on, you know, solutions to problems and answers to questions in ways that, you know, we may never have expected before. Like, because you can find an answer to a question you didn't even know you had, and that can look like a lot of different things.
Let me ask a question within that. So with No Typical Moments, pretty much everyone in our portfolio is what I call online education. So it's book, courses, maybe masterminds, certification training programs. So that's kind of one bucket of a vertical that we're in. Maybe another bucket would be e-com, for instance. And let's say you're selling, I don't know, shoes. In your experience as a copywriter, knowing what it's been in No Typical Moments, but you've had a lot of experience before us, how does that change per vertical in terms of the maybe it's storytelling or even the pain point addressing? Because it's for instance, of the shoe, you don't necessarily need a shoe. It's a luxury item versus maybe, I don't know, education related to how to increase your income. I don't know if it's a necessity. It's not food or shelter, but it's tilting more in that direction.
Right. I mean, yeah, I think it's a little bit easier to like see the direct value when, you know, it's like a big program or a product or something like that, rather than like shoes. But I don't know, like recently I saw a Facebook ad for I had just broken like my favorite spatula, and I found a Facebook ad for like a professional grade, like, you know, line cook spatula. And I've been burned by like Facebook ads in the past. So I like don't always like trust them immediately, but I'm like, okay, you know what? It's a little more than I would probably spend at like Safeway to get like some spatula off the wall, but let's try it. And I gotta tell you, this spatula is like changing my life. It's just like fun to use and it's great. And it makes me so happy every time I need to go cook something. Um, and so I think that's just that's just an example of like a product that like we don't need, like you don't even know you need it maybe until like it comes to you. I don't know if I did any sort of Google searches beforehand for like best
You
spatula.
definitely said something of like, man, my spatula broke, and then Facebook deployed it to you.
Yeah, I was pretty close to Alexa at the time in the kitchen, so it could have happened.
Well, let's go to our last point, Stephen. What is point number 3 that we want to talk through today?
Our last point, the elephant in the room that I think we have to talk about if we're talking about copywriting is AI copywriting. Very like fascinating stuff. I personally am a nerd, so I think it's very cool to see how kind of it's evolved a little bit. My understanding is that like you basically plug in certain amount of information depending on which service you're using. So it might just be like, random words, and then it kind of spits out a bunch of different headlines for you or something. Or maybe I think there are some services that even will let you include things like, pain points in industry and like the problem that you solve and the solution. And the end result, like when it spits it back out, like is very convincing to me. And it's only after you read a bunch of examples of this that like you start to get the sense that like maybe there's like something missing here. And my theory is that for some reason or another, machines are not yet capable of terribly great storytelling or like emotion. Could not explain to you why a machine can't do that. But like I was saying earlier, like copy is all about the connection, and AI is not virtually capable of putting itself in your reader's shoes. It's basically it's not really like, it's a little more strategic, I think, than just hurling words at your readers, but like that kind of is what it feels like sometimes. And I have heard an argument from copywriters that AI can be a really powerful tool for like inspiration, but I kind of personally feel that like any sort of inspiration like that sort of puts you on a path to begin with. Like in Gmail when you're like drafting an email and it will like predict the words that you like, and then you're like, was I even going to use those words? Like sometimes, in an email, it's not always like that important, but is that really the world we want to live in, Andrew? Like where we've reached singularity and we're just making everything sound the way Google thinks the world should sound. I think
reading Ready Player One the other day, so that's very top of mind for me of what our future might look like.
And like I said, I'm fascinated by it, and I think it's really interesting. But like, I personally think that like great copy happens when you put the work in, either by your own trial and error, or like if you're working alongside a writer or an agency who's like genuinely invested in helping you speak to your leads from a place of alignment and authenticity. Because I think that's where the magic happens. And like, I don't think even AI copy is going to perform very well if you haven't already put in some work to like figure out where your readers are, like what your audience is struggling with, like, and how your product can help them, ideally in their words. Like that's the best you can get. But if you're intentional about the decisions you're making, and you're paying attention to the way your leads seem to be engaging with your copy, I think that you will learn something from that every time you put something out, because it's iterative. It's just constantly evolving. Your first round of copy is going to be your worst round of copy, and it only gets better from there. I don't really think there are any shortcuts.
Let me ask you this as our closing question. So if we look back at, the 1960s and Mad Men and what it was like with them, copywriting, advertising agency, to now AIs in the future, there's obviously this huge window of technology that's been booming. So what technology do you like as a copywriter? And that might be as simple as, I love now that we get to use email automation software to auto program out responses. What is some technology you do enjoy?
We were talking about this a little bit earlier, but just like dabbling in SEO a little bit has been like massive, because like I feel like that's the closest you can get to like the words you're your leads are actually using to like solve a problem. Like even when you're talking in a physical conversation with a lead, like you don't always know for sure that they're going to like phrase their problem in the same way that they phrase it in their head, or if it's like addressing all of the concerns that like they have. And when you're actually seeing what they're typing into Google, I just think that's a tremendous tool to, connect with your reader and figure out what is actually troubling them and, how to solve that for them.
I've seen really funny SEO phrases or terms, whatever it is. I don't have a good background in SEO, where it might actually be the misspelling of a word because of what you just said. That's actually such a good quantity and volume that you actually would want to be targeting your SEO campaign.
Right.
That misspelled.
Right.
Or I guess
Absolutely.
AdWords. I'm thinking more AdWords campaigns. But nevertheless, Stephen, it was awesome to speak with you, and your 3 insights were very much appreciated.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me, Andrew.